Chapter 1. Shattered Reality. My grandfather's antique shop wasn't the sort of place you'd call magical. It smelled of cedar wood and old paper, cluttered with dusty books, lacquered boxes, and porcelain figures that seemed to stare back at you. But there was a charm to it, a sense of quiet permanence, a sanctuary hidden from the chaos of Tokyo. I liked it there, especially after my classes. No professors breathing down my neck, no noisy classmates asking me why I kept to myself. Just me, my thoughts, and shelves full of forgotten stories. I was cleaning one of the back shelves when I found it. The artifact wasn't on any inventory list. At first, I thought it was just another piece of junk, a dull hexagonal object covered in intricate carvings. It was small, fitting comfortably in my hand, but there was something about it that made my chest tighten. The engravings seemed to shimmer as I turned it in the light, almost like they were alive. My grandfather hadn't mentioned it before, and he was meticulous about every item in the shop. That alone was strange. As I stared at it, something in the air shifted. A faint hum, barely audible, seemed to emanate from the artifact. I told myself it was probably just a trick of the wind, but my fingers tightened around it instinctively. "Miyu," my grandfather's voice called from the front of the shop. "Are you done back there?" I hesitated, my eyes still fixed on the object. "Almost, Grandpa." I should have just put it back on the shelf and walked away, but something about it was calling to me, urging me to hold on. Before I knew it, my thumb brushed over a small indent at the center of the artifact. That's when everything changed. The world around me seemed to ripple, like a stone breaking the surface of a still pond. My knees buckled, and the artifact pulsed in my hand, the carvings glowing with an otherworldly light. A strange warmth spread through my palm, up my arm and into my chest. I gasped, trying to pull away, but it was too late. The shop dissolved into a cascade of light and shadow, and I was falling into a kaleidoscope of swirling colors and fractured shapes. When I landed, it wasn't on solid ground. It felt like I was standing on air, weightless, surrounded by an endless void. Above and below me, streams of golden light wove together like threads in a massive loom, stretching into infinity. The hexagonal artifact floated in front of me, spinning slowly. "Welcome, Miyu Arisaka," a voice echoed, deep and resonant, yet strangely gentle. I turned, but there was no one there. Only the vast expanse of the void and the glowing strands of light. "Who's there? What's going on?" "You have been chosen," the voice continued. "The heroic matrix has called to you. Do you accept its bond?" I blinked. "Heroic matrix? Bond? I don't even know what you're talking about." The voice didn't answer. Instead, the space around me shifted. The glowing strands of light began to twist and converge, forming shapes. No, memories. My memories. I saw myself as a child, sitting alone on the playground while the other kids played tag. I saw my teenage years, the moments I spent burying myself in books and anime instead of making friends. And then, I saw my mother's funeral, the day I realized I would never hear her voice again. "You have lived in the shadow of your doubts," the voice said. "But courage lies not in being without fear, but in facing it. Will you rise to meet the challenge?" The void trembled, and suddenly I was no longer weightless. I was standing on a battlefield, my sneakers sinking into scorched earth. The battlefield felt endless. Vast empty plains stretched into a horizon that seemed to blur and ripple as though the very air was alive. The ground beneath my feet was cracked and dry, a lifeless wasteland devoid of color. Above, the sky swirled with dark clouds, a storm brewing with no thunder or rain, just an oppressive silence that made my skin crawl. My breath came in shallow gasps, my chest tightening as I clutched at my sides. I wasn't a fighter. I wasn't brave. I was just Miyu Arisaka, a girl who spent more time in her head than out in the real world. Yet here I was, alone in this strange place, expected to face. What? I didn't know. But the feeling in the air told me it was coming. Something was coming. "Prove yourself worthy of the heroic matrix," the disembodied voice had said. Easy for them to say when they weren't standing here, practically paralyzed by fear. Then I saw them, glinting objects scattered across the ground, as if they had fallen from the heavens. Weapons, lots of them. Long swords with ornate hilts. Bows carved with intricate patterns. Wands that glowed faintly in the dim light. Axes that looked like they could cleave mountains. And shields of all shapes and sizes. They were displayed in a perfect circle around me, each one humming faintly with energy, calling out in a way I couldn't explain. For a moment, I simply stared at them, my feet rooted in place. I didn't move, afraid to even breathe too loudly, as if the wrong move would set off some kind of trap. "What is this?" I whispered to no one in particular, my voice trembling. "Am I supposed to just pick one? And then what?" The silence around me was deafening, save for the faint hum of the weapons. My pulse thundered in my ears as I slowly turned in place, taking in the array of choices. There were no instructions, no guidance, no hints, just me and these weapons. A long polished katana caught my eye first. Its blade gleamed with a beautiful light, the handle wrapped in white silk. I felt a faint pull toward it, like an invisible thread was tugging me towards it. Then there was a bow with silver inlays that shimmered like starlight. Next to it was a sleek staff, its crystal tip glowing faintly with an inner fire. Each weapon seemed to radiate a unique energy, distinct but equally powerful. As I stood in the center, my heart still hammering in my chest, I couldn't help but feel a strange shift within me as I looked at the weapons. As my eyes swept over them, the gleaming katana, the elegant bow, the sturdy shield and spear, I began to feel something else, possibility. And yet, I hesitated. How am I supposed to know which one? I muttered under my breath, my frustration growing alongside my fear. What if I choose wrong? The voice from earlier didn't respond. No divine intervention, no guiding hand, just me and the oppressive weight of the decision. My hands trembled as I took a step toward the katana, then stopped. My gaze shifted to the bow, then to a massive battle axe. I couldn't bring myself to touch any of them. Every time I thought I'd made a decision, doubt crept in, whispering in the back of my mind. I shook my head, trying to banish the thoughts, but they clung to me like shadows. My legs felt weak, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I could feel the pressure building, the expectation that I had to act, had to make a choice. And yet, all I wanted to do was run. Then the ground beneath me trembled. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The faint rumble grew stronger, the cracks in the ground widening as something massive stirred below. Whatever it was rising, I whispered, taking a step back. This can't be happening. But it was. The battlefield had come alive, and the thing that was coming was no longer a distant threat. It was here. A grotesque clawed hand burst through the earth, black and skeletal, dripping with an inky substance that hissed as it hit the ground. Another hand followed, pulling up a body that was like a nightmare made flesh. Its form was monstrous, too many limbs, too many eyes, its entire body shrouded in a swirling shadow that seemed to devour the light around it. The creature's eyes glowed an unholy red, locking onto me as it let out a guttural roar that shook the very air. I stumbled back, my legs almost giving out beneath me. This wasn't just some trial, this was life or death, and I had no idea what I was doing. You have to fight, I whispered to myself, trying to steady my breathing. You can't just stand here. But my body wouldn't move. As the creature crawled closer, its claws digging into the earth with a sickening scrape, something shifted in the air around me. It wasn't the oppressive weight of fear or the hum of the weapons. It was something different, a presence. My eyes locked onto a weapon I hadn't noticed before. A Roman shield and spear, simple in design but radiating a quiet, steady power. The shield was round, its surface polished and reinforced with metal bands, while the spear was sleek and balanced, its tip gleaming like a star. Images of Achilles and Alexander the Great burned brightly in my mind, their forms larger than life, each embodying the kind of heroism I had only ever dreamed about. Achilles, the legendary warrior of Greek mythology, stood proud and fierce, his bronze armor gleaming under the light of the battlefield as he charged forward with his spear raised high. I had read everything I could find about him when I was younger, how he was fearless, unstoppable, but also deeply human beneath his godlike strength. Then came Alexander the Great, the brilliant tactician and conqueror who built an empire that stretched across continents. I could see him standing tall, his eyes alight with ambition, his cloak billowing in the wind as he led armies into the unknown. I had always been fascinated by his unparalleled drive, his belief that no horizon was too far, no challenge too great. These were the figures who had inspired me in my quiet moments of doubt, the ones who made me believe that greatness wasn't just for gods but for mortals who dared to seize it. And now their legacies seemed to stand before me, urging me to take my place among them. Greek and Roman mythology had always been my escape, my sanctuary. While other kids obsessed over pop stars or sports heroes, I buried myself in stories of gods, warriors, and ancient civilizations. I spent hours sketching Athena's owl or reading about the cunning of Odysseus, dreaming about what it might feel like to wield a weapon like Artemis, or to walk in the footsteps of a hero like Perseus. There was something timeless and grounding about those myths, stories of humans who stood shoulder to shoulder with gods, defying fate and forging their own destinies. As the images of Achilles and Alexander the Great flickered in my mind, I felt a sense of familiarity and awe, as though they weren't just legends but kindred spirits guiding me toward a path I had always longed to walk. And for the first time, The fear in my chest began to give way to something stronger, a quiet but undeniable resolve. Their strength, their determination, it washed over me like a wave, pushing back the fear that had gripped me. They had faced impossible odds. They had stood against monsters and gods alike. And now, it was my turn. Without thinking, I stepped forward and reached for them. As my fingers closed around the grip of the shield and the shaft of the spear, a surge of energy shot through me. It wasn't overwhelming or chaotic. It was steady, grounding. The fear that had held me back began to fade, replaced by something else. Not courage exactly, but a kind of resolve. I turned to face the creature, gripping the shield tightly with one hand and the spear with the other. My heart was still pounding, but I no longer felt frozen. The monster roared again, its many eyes blazing as it lunged toward me, its claws tearing through the air. I raised the shield just in time, bracing myself as the force of its attack slammed into me. The impact rattled my bones, but I held firm, gritting my teeth as I pushed back. The creature's claws scraped against the shield, sparks flying as I shoved it away. Then I struck. I drove the spear forward with all the strength I could muster, aiming for the creature's torso. It shrieked as the spear pierced its shadowy flesh, a burst of light erupting from the wound. The creature recoiled, its many limbs flailing as it stumbled back. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe. The spear in my hand felt like an extension of myself, as if it had always been there. The shield, too, felt natural, like a part of me I hadn't known was missing. The monster wasn't done. It let out another roar, its form shifting and writhing as it prepared to attack again. But this time, I was ready. I shifted my stance, holding the shield in front of me and the spear poised to strike. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I was in control now. "You want me to prove myself?" I muttered under my breath, my grip tightening. "Fine. Let's see what I've got." As the creature lunged toward me again, I charged forward to meet it. When it attacked again, I was ready. It came at me from the side, its claw aiming for my exposed flank, but I spun on my heel, bringing the shield up to deflect the blow. The impact sent me skidding back a few steps, but I stayed upright, my feet steady on the cracked ground. The creature snarled, its frustration palpable, and I saw my opening. I drove forward, using the momentum of my spin to thrust the spear straight into its chest. The tip of the spear pierced deep, and this time, I didn't pull back. I pushed with everything I had, pouring all my weight and strength into the strike. Light erupted from the creature's core, blinding and brilliant, and its screech turned into a low, guttural wail. The shadows that made up its body began to unravel, peeling away like smoke caught in a gale. Its limbs dissolved one by one, the red glow of its eyes dimming until they flickered out completely. With one final, agonized cry, the creature collapsed into itself, disappearing in a burst of light and shadow that left the battlefield eerily quiet. I stood there, chest heaving, staring at the spot where the monster had been. My arms felt like they were made of lead, and my legs trembled beneath me, but I didn't let go of the spear or the shield. Not yet. The battlefield was still and silent, but the adrenaline coursing through me wouldn't let me relax. "You have done well," the voice said again, calm and steady. "The trial is complete. You are worthy." The weapons in my hands began to glow softly, the light spreading from the spear and shield to envelop me. It wasn't harsh or blinding, it was warm, soothing, like sunlight breaking through the clouds. The aches in my body faded, replaced by a strange sense of clarity and strength. "You have chosen the path of the sentinel," the voice continued, "a defender, unyielding and steadfast. Your journey is only beginning, but you have taken your first step toward becoming a true hero." Before I could respond, the light around me grew brighter, swallowing the battlefield. The cracked earth, the swirling sky, the remnants of the battle. All of it dissolved into nothingness, and I felt myself being pulled forward, weightless and unmoored. The light faded, and I found myself standing in a new space, a vast surreal dimension that looked like the inside of a crystal. Towering spires of shimmering light surrounded me, and at the center of it all was a massive orb, pulsating with energy. "This is the heroic matrix," the voice said, "the heart of the multiverse. Every story, every world is connected through its threads, but a great darkness threatens to unravel it." As if on cue, part of the heroic matrix darkened. A swirling void began to spread, consuming the threads of light. I saw fragments of a world, a giant mech, a boy with messy brown hair, a red-haired girl in a plug suit. It took me a moment to recognize it. "Evangelion?" I whispered. "Is that real?" "The void consumes all," the voice said. "It corrupts and destroys, leaving nothing but emptiness. You must stop it, Miyu Arisaka." "Me?" I stepped back, shaking my head. You've got the wrong person. I'm just a college student. I don't know how to fight some multiverse-destroying darkness. The heroic matrix has chosen you for a reason, the voice said. You have the power to acquire the skills and abilities of the world you visit. But you must act quickly. If the void is not stopped, all stories will end. Before I could protest, the heroic matrix pulsed, and I was enveloped in light once again. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in a dimly lit room. The walls were metal, the air smelled sterile, and the faint hum of machinery filled my ears. I recognized it immediately, Nerve headquarters. I barely had time to process where I was before a sharp voice cut through the air. You must be the one they told me about. I turned to see Misato Katsuragi standing in the doorway, her arms crossed and her usual smirk plastered on her face. She looked exactly like she did in the anime, right down to the red jacket and purple hair. I stammered, struggling to find the right words. I think I'm supposed to help? Misato raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. You don't look like much, but I don't have any other options. She tossed me something, a sleek black and red plug suit. I caught it awkwardly, staring at it like it was going to bite me. Put that on, she said. We've got work to do. And don't worry, your partners will be joining us soon. Let's hope they're a little more prepared than you are. I swallowed hard, gripping the plug suit tightly. This wasn't a dream, this was real. And whether I was ready or not, I had just become part of something far bigger than myself. She sighed before speaking. All right, kid, listen up. This isn't exactly the welcome to Nerve speech I had prepared, but we don't have time for niceties. I shifted awkwardly, clutching the plug suit she had tossed at me. What's going on? Why am I here? I don't understand any of this. She turned to face me, her eyes sharp and focused. The short version, our former pilots Shinji, Asuka, and Rai, all of them, they're gone. My stomach dropped. Gone? What do you mean? Like, dead? Misato hesitated, her jaw tightening. Defeated. The last angel we fought, it was unlike anything we'd ever seen. It came out of nowhere, faster and stronger than anything we've encountered before. The Eves didn't stand a chance. We lost contact with all three of them during the battle. Nerve hasn't been able to recover their units or confirm their status. The weight of her words settled over me like a heavy blanket. This wasn't the Evangelion I remembered. This was a version where things had gone horribly wrong. But, Misato continued, snapping me out of my thoughts, we're not out of the fight just yet. We still have our 3 experimental EVA units and now we have new pilots. Reinforcements, you mean? My partners? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. I was in so much shock that I had forgotten she mentioned partners before. Yeah, she said, nodding. Apparently 2 others like you will be joining us soon. Until then, we've got to get you up to speed. You've got a lot to learn if you're going to survive here. I frowned, gripping the plug suit tighter. I don't even know how to pilot an EVA, and you're expecting me to fight angels? Misato's smirk returned, but there was still a hint of seriousness in her tone. Don't worry. We've got time before the next angel shows up, or at least that's what the readings are telling us. For now, we're going to focus on training. We'll put you through a simulation first, see what you're made of. A simulation? I asked, feeling my nerves spike. She crossed her arms and gave me a pointed look. What, you thought I was just going to toss you into an EVA and hope for the best? Even I'm not that reckless. Anymore. I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. And if I can't do it? Misato's expression softened just a little. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This isn't some game where you can hit reset if things go wrong. People's lives are on the line, the entire world is. But I've seen miracles happen before. I've seen kids like you step up when no one else could. If you're here, then you've got something worth fighting for. We just need to figure out what that is. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I thought back to the trial I'd faced in the heroic matrix, the fear and doubt that had clawed at me. Maybe this was why I was chosen, to find that strength within myself, even if I didn't believe it was there. I nodded, my grip on the plug suit tightening. All right, I'll try. Good, Misato said, her smirk turning into a genuine smile. That's what I like to hear. Now, get suited up. You've got 10 minutes before the simulation starts. Ritsuko's already waiting for us in the control room, and she hates being kept waiting. I blinked. Ritsuko, you mean Dr. Akagi, the one and only, Misato said, turning to leave. She'll handle the technical side of things. Me? I'll be cheering you on and making sure you don't pass out from neural overload. Wait, neural overload? I called after her, but she was already halfway out the door. Relax, kid, she said over her shoulder. You'll do fine. Probably. I stared at the plug suit in my hands, my heart racing. This was real. I was about to step into a world I'd only ever seen on a screen, with stakes higher than I could have ever imagined. and somehow I had to find the strength to face it. "All right," I whispered to myself, "let's do this." With trembling hands, I started putting on the plug suit. The material of the plug suit clung to me like a second skin, slick and tight in ways that made me feel self-conscious. The black and red design hugged every curve, and the faint hum of its internal systems made it feel strangely alive. As I adjusted the high collar, the small readouts on the suit's sleeves blinked softly, calibrating to my body. I caught my reflection in a nearby mirror and barely recognized myself. It wasn't just the suit. It was the weight of everything that had happened. The battlefield, the trial, the monster, it had already changed something inside me. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the nervous energy in my chest. I wasn't sure what Misato had planned for me, but if this simulation was anything like the trial, I had a bad feeling about it. The faint buzz of fluorescent lights filled the silence of the locker room as I leaned against the bench, trying to ground myself. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and Misato strolled in, her confident stride as effortless as ever. She had a smirk on her face, the kind that said she knew something I didn't. Following close behind her was someone else, a woman I hadn't seen before. "This is Sierra Johnson," Misato announced, gesturing to the newcomer with a casual wave. "She'll be working with you in the simulation. Think of her as your first partner." I straightened up immediately, my curiosity piqued. Sierra was striking, her presence commanding in a way that didn't feel forced. She was a little taller than me, her light brown skin glowing faintly under the artificial lighting. Her curly black hair was tied into a high puff, and her sharp, intelligent eyes seemed to take in everything at once. She wore a fitted plug suit similar to mine, though hers was a deep navy blue with silver accents. Sierra crossed her arms, flashing me a lopsided grin. "So, you're the rookie, huh?" Yeah," I said awkwardly, trying to match her energy but failing miserably. "Miyu Arisaka." Misato clapped her hands together, cutting off any further awkward introductions. "All right, you two, get acquainted. You'll be spending a lot of time together. I've got to check on the simulation setup. Don't keep me waiting too long." She turned on her heel and left without another word, leaving me alone with Sierra. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I wasn't sure what to say, and Sierra seemed content to let the silence hang. She was studying me, her gaze curious but not unkind, like she was trying to size me up. "So," I began hesitantly. "Misato said you're my partner?" "Looks like it," Sierra said, her grin widening. "Not what I expected when I woke up today, but hey, life's full of surprises, right?" I laughed nervously, unsure how to respond. Her confidence was magnetic, but it also made me feel even more out of my depth. I glanced at her plug suit, the sleek design emphasizing her athletic build. She looked like she belonged here, like she'd been doing this her entire life. I, on the other hand, felt like a kid playing dress-up. "So, where are you from?" I asked, more to fill the silence than anything else. Sierra raised an eyebrow. "I am from Tokyo." "Of course, why do you ask?" she said unconvincingly. "No, it's just..." I hesitated, trying to find the right words. "Are you from Earth? I mean, my Earth?" Her expression shifted immediately, the playful smirk replaced by wide-eyed surprise. "Wait, you're from Earth too?" I nodded, my heart racing. "Tokyo, and not Tokyo. And you?" "Philadelphia," she said slowly, as if the word itself was a revelation. Holy crap, I thought I was the only one. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the weight of the realization settling over us. The multiverse, the void, the heroic matrix, it all seemed so abstract until now. But knowing that, Sierra and I were both from Earth, from versions of the same world, made it feel real in a way I hadn't been prepared for. "So, this is insane, right?" I said, finally breaking the silence. "Oh, absolutely," Sierra said with a laugh. "I mean, one minute I'm helping some old lady with her groceries back in Philly, and the next thing I know, I'm in some cosmic trial fighting shadow monsters. And now I'm here, in a plug suit, about to pilot something called an EV, which I'm still not convinced isn't just a giant death trap." I couldn't help but laugh at her candor. "You don't know the half of it. I barely even know how I got here. One minute I was holding this weird artifact in my grandfather's shop, and the next I was being told I had to save the multiverse." Despite the absurdity of the situation, I felt a strange sense of comfort talking to her. She was so grounded, so unapologetically herself, that it made the chaos feel a little less overwhelming. For the first time since this whole thing started, I didn't feel completely alone. "So," I said, a small smile tugging at my lips, "you're really okay with all of this? The void, the multiverse, fighting angels." "Okay with it?" Sierra repeated, her grin returning. "Not even a little bit. But what am I gonna do?" Say no and let everything fall apart? Nah, I'm here now, so I might as well make the most of it. Her confidence was infectious, and I found myself nodding along. Yeah, I guess you're right. Damn straight I am, she said, clapping me on the shoulder. And don't worry, rookie. I've got your back. We'll figure this crazy mess out together. Thanks, I said, genuinely grateful. I'm glad you're here. Same, she said, her expression softening. Now, let's get out there and show Misato what we're made of. I nodded, and together we left the locker room, stepping into the corridor where Misato was waiting. The hum of Nerve's machinery filled the air, and the faint vibrations of the facility's massive systems pulsed beneath our feet. As we approached, Misato looked up from her clipboard, her smirk returning. Glad to see you two are getting along, she said. Let's hope that teamwork carries over into the simulation. Ready to dive in? I glanced at Sierra, who gave me a confident nod. Ready, I said, more for myself than anyone else. Misato's grin widened. Good. Let's see what you've got. As we followed her toward the simulation chamber, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. The path ahead was uncertain, and the challenges were sure to be overwhelming, but for the first time, I wasn't facing them alone. And that made all the difference.